Sí, okay. Shall we start? Because it's 2:31. Thank you. And this is the session Fiscal Policies and Sovereign Default. My name is Roberto De Santis, and the first presenter is Lucius Cassim, Fiscal Policy Regimes in Least Developed Countries. Is Lucius? Okay.
Okay, welcome to this presentation. I'm going to talk about fiscal policy regimes in least developed countries. This is probably an area or a question, as you will see later on, that Professor John Cochrane advises not to try to answer. But yes, the question that I want to, or I'm asking this question in this paper is, I want to see or analyze the evolution of fiscal surpluses in least developed countries. That is to say, do fiscal surpluses in least developed countries evolve in a manner that ensures long-term fiscal solvency? In other words, do fiscal surpluses endogenously determined in a manner that ensures that in the long term the economy is solvent? If that is the case, Sargent calls that behavior a Ricardian fiscal regime, as you may know. What this means is that if a fiscal authority borrows $1 today, that dollar has to be paid. And one way of paying that dollar back is to raise future taxes in the future and pay back the dollar. That means future taxes are being determined by the previous levels of debt. In other words, the surpluses are endogenously determined by the levels of debt. That means we are in a Ricardian regime, so to say. Otherwise, if fiscal surpluses are arbitrarily chosen, that is to say, the country borrows $1 today, taxes don't go up in the future, but that dollar has to be paid anyway. But it's not going to be paid by an increase in fiscal surpluses. One way is that prices have to increase to make that dollar worthless. So that regime is non-Ricardian, as Sargent calls it. So you just make the dollar worthless because you can't pay it using taxes. What I want to do in this paper is to just examine, or so to say, identify if least developed countries can be categorized as being Ricardian or non-Ricardian. Actually, surpluses in LDCs seem to evolve pretty much different from other countries, as you see. Here I have a simple graph that shows the evolution of primary surpluses in least developed countries. And you can see that there is a weakly negative correlation between surpluses and liabilities, which would somehow mean that the surpluses here are not endogenously determined by the levels of liabilities. Because one would expect to have a positive correlation. That is, when the liabilities are increasing, surpluses have to increase so that you have resources to pay back the liabilities. Just to go into details, if we compare some selected LDCs and some selected advanced economies, you see that the three LDCs in the first row have a negative correlation, while some of these chosen advanced economies have positive correlation. Of course, this is not definite to say that the LDCs are under an Riccardian regime, because a negative correlation or a positive correlation can occur in either of these regimes. It just depends on the direction of causality. For example, a positive correlation that we observe in the US means that as liabilities are increasing, surpluses are increasing. That would mean a Riccardian regime. But if I say that as surpluses are increasing, liabilities are also increasing, that would be categorized as a non-Riccardian regime. So a simple correlation is not enough. But my point here is that LDCs seem to have surpluses that are evolving pretty much different from the evolution of the same in advanced or other economies. Now, why am I asking this question? I think it's pretty much clear to everyone in this room that the evolution of surpluses or a fiscal policy regime has implications on the effects of, or our understanding of the effects of the national policies, for example, monetary or exchange rate policies. As I said, under an Riccardian fiscal regime, because future surpluses cannot increase, to service accumulated liabilities, prices jump to make the liabilities worthless. That means prices respond or move in a way that ensures long-term fiscal solvency, and that challenges the effectiveness of conventional monetary policy rules. And in addition to this, the literature search shows that most studies that identify regimes have been done in advanced economies or emerging markets. And that's why I'm asking this question. Now, what I find is not very strange. What I find is that I took a time series data for some selected LDCs. I would have loved to have all of the LDCs, but data is a challenge for some series. And we ran a structural VAR for each of the selected countries. And what we find is that surpluses seem to be evolving arbitrarily without regard to the levels of debt, which would mean that we can categorize least developed countries as being under non-Riccardian regime. Of course, this implies that monetary policy, or most likely conventional monetary policy, will most likely be less effective in these countries, because prices jump in order to ensure fiscal solvency. We strongly suspect that this behavior of surpluses is being driven by the poor institutional quality in these countries. To test this, we found that surpluses respond positively to improved institutional quality, number one, because if the theory that poor institutional quality is to blame, then it must be the case that surpluses have a relationship with the quality of institutions, and that's what we found. And then we took some selected developing countries that are not quite different from LDCs in terms of level of development, but have better institutional quality index, and ran a VAR on them. And what we found is that in those countries, surpluses seem to be endogenously determined with the need to ensure long-term solvency. And that makes us suspect that maybe we can attribute this to poor quality poor quality institutions. Now, I'll jump this. I will not say much on this. This is the common non-government present value budget constraint. What that says is that in the long term, government has to be solvent. The expected surpluses, the present value of expected surpluses in the long term will have to be equal to the accumulated liabilities, which is omega here. Now, this holds whether you are in Ricardian or non-Ricardian regime, but the behavior of omega and the behavior of omega and chi in the short run, as the system gravitates towards the long run, is the one that would help us identify whether we are in Ricardian or non-Ricardian regime. Obviously, if, for example, we have a positive shock to chi, in a Ricardian regime, omega has to go down. In a non-Ricardian regime, if we have positive shock to chi, omega would increase or it would stay the same. In other words, omega would not go down when we have a positive shock to chi in non-Ricardian regime. But in the long term, omega has to be equal to the present value of the surpluses, because households would not allow fiscal authorities to run Ponzi schemes. So that's the theory. The methods, what I did is that we collected data from 8 LDCs. Like I said, we didn't have enough data on the other LDCs. We would have loved to have data on them. We have about 45 LDCs in total. Unfortunately, we are able to just get data on these 8. Got data on this period, 1980 to 2022. And for comparative purposes, we applied the same method on some selected advanced economies just to check if we could get different results. Now, this is the model that we run. We run its this structural VAR. The endogenous series here are the surpluses, liabilities, and the time varying discount factor here as depicted in the budget constraint that I showed earlier on. And then the etas are the perpendicular structural shocks. Our interest was very simple here. If we have a positive shock to surpluses, how do liabilities respond over time? That's what we were interested in. Now, obviously the order matters here. The ordering was done like this. That's we assumed that the surpluses are contemporaneously exogenous, but of course we reversed the ordering and the results are the same. You see here, I'm assuming that the surpluses are contemporaneously exogenous. That would mean that I'm already assuming a non-Ricardian regime, which means if I'm to be sure, I have to reverse it and assume that the omega is contemporaneously exogenous, which would mean the other way around, and the results were the same, like I said. To decide, what we did was that the response here of omega to positive surplus shocks, if it's negative, obviously you are in Ricardian regime. If it's not negative, we can suspect non-Ricardian regime based on this, of course, ordering. So surpluses increase, you expect that the liabilities will go down because they will use the resources to repay the accumulated liability. So the decision was that simple. Of course, this decision is based on the assumption that the surpluses are not negatively autocorrelated. As you can see, in Ricardian regime, an increase in surpluses would automatically mean that liabilities go down at some point in the future. But this can also happen in non-Ricardian regime if the autocorrelation of surpluses is negative. Because first of all, if the autocorrelation of surpluses is 0, it means if surpluses increase today, surpluses tomorrow do not change. After all, surpluses tomorrow are not related to surpluses today. And therefore, liabilities would not change as well. If there's a positive correlation, then an increase in surpluses today would mean surpluses tomorrow will increase. And if surpluses tomorrow increases, the liabilities will have to increase if we go back to this equation here. So if this increases, this will have to increase under non-Ricardian regime. Now, the third option here is that if we have negative autocorrelation, it means surpluses increasing today, surpluses tomorrow are going down. If they go down, the liabilities would also go down. But that negative correlation between surpluses and liabilities is the same that we observe under Ricardian regime, which means if we have negative correlation, liabilities would go down. Liabilities would go down following an increase in surpluses, which is the same as what happens under Ricardian regime, which means we cannot identify a regime if we have this scenario here. So it must be the case that the autocorrelation of surpluses must be positive or zero for us to be able to identify. And this is one of the reasons why Professor Cochrane is against identifying regimes empirically. Now, let me not talk much about the choice of priors, which I don't have time. In terms of the findings, I started with a simple look at the autocorrelation structure. Like I said, autocorrelation structure of surpluses was important. And in most of these countries, we noted that we have positive autocorrelation up to 6 lags or 6 years. Some countries up to 10, for example, Malawi here. What this means is that a positive shock to surpluses creates a chain of increases in surpluses into the future. So since there is no evidence of negative autocorrelation, at least for the first 6 years, we could therefore identify a regime because we don't have this scenario here that I was talking about. Of course, in some cases, in some countries, you see that we have negative autocorrelation, and in some cases we have zero autocorrelation. And so, just in summary, this means that we can at least identify these regimes empirically. These are the results. I only produced results for, I'm only presenting results for 2 countries. Like I said, I ran these for all of the 8 countries. Because I don't have enough time and space to produce all of them, but the results are the same across the countries. As you can see, in Malawi and Comoros, the countries that I chose to present results here, the liabilities are not responding, do not respond to surplus shocks up to 10 years or 10 lags, which is in line, would be in line with the fact that surpluses in this case are exogenously or arbitrarily determined. Because if they were not, then we would have a response, particularly a negative response of liabilities to surplus shocks. If we compare that with some selected advanced economies, you see that I just took US here and Australia. You see we have a negative correlation, a negative response of liabilities to surplus, positive surplus shocks, which is in line with non-Ricardian fiscal regimes. So this led me to conclude, therefore, that these countries, in these countries, surpluses are arbitrarily determined. Now, so this is just a summary of what we found. We have positive response of positive autocorrelation of surpluses, but liabilities do not respond to positive surplus shocks, but the opposite happens in some of chosen advanced economies. Why is this the case? Our theory or our suspicion is that this is because of poor quality governance institutions. As we know, and according to De Blun, quality of institutions determine the evolution of surpluses. So what we did to test this, we just looked at simple correlation between surpluses and quality of institutions in LDCs. And then we took some developing countries that have at least better governance institution quality, but not so much different from LDCs in terms of level of development, and check the response of liabilities to surplus shocks. Now, in terms of simple correlation, we run this equation here just to see how primary surpluses respond to institutional quality using a measure of institutional quality that was proposed by this guy, De Bruin and Kamar, 2009. And the results that we found, positive correlation. We find a positive correlation between institutional quality and the surpluses, both total surplus or indeed structural surplus. Next, like I said, we looked at the statistics of institutional quality indices, and we found that these two countries here, Mauritius and Botswana, have some very good institutional quality index, at least based on the index that we were using. And we estimated the structural VAR on them. And you can see here that the response of liabilities to surplus shocks in Mauritius and Botswana is negative, the same way as advanced economies. And these results, therefore, made us suspect strongly that we can attribute the results that we found to institutional quality issues. Yeah, so what we found in this is that the surpluses in LDCs are arbitrarily chosen, implying that we have non-Ricardian fiscal regimes. We are strongly suspecting that this is because of the poor governance institutions. And of course, these results cast doubt, as we know theoretically, that under that scenario, conventional monetary policy may not necessarily be effective. To the contrary, of course, advanced economies which have better quality institutions seem to show Ricardian regime tendencies. Thank you very much. This is what we did.
Any question?
Thanks, Lucius. Did you consider debt relief to the African countries? So, there are many heavily indebted poor countries. I think that I actually just Googled quickly, so thanks for Google. There's about $100 billion at the moment. So when we're considering, sustainability of the fiscus, I think it would be important to control for that in some way with your LDCs. Yeah. Did you think about that? And
we didn't. I did not control for that. Maybe that's one of the things that I may need to consider going forward. But I did not.
Thank you. You showed us that if surplus is the autocorrelation of surplus is negative, it's a good little bit. I just tried to figure out why this is the case. So even though the autocorrelation of surplus is negative, in absolute term, if there's a positive shock on surplus, you still have positive surplus. What is the logic behind this? If there's a negative autocorrelation of surplus, then you will end up with a decrease in liabilities. I'm not sure if this makes sense to me or I didn't get the point. But nevertheless, in the results, we would expect you to see different alternative scenarios, the results, right, which you didn't show. We would expect to see that. Um, my another comment is that you also talk about whether it's recording or non-recording, there will be implications for both monetary and fiscal policy making, and then in your study you basically just try to identify whether it's recording or non-recording. So I'm not sure you're going to extend your study. My last comments would be, always struggle to understand this kind of research question if you don't use a structure model. You mentioned Cochrane's 2023 paper. In his paper, he looked at as we all know as well, when you look at this recording or non-recording, you have to look at the growth rate and the interest rate policy, the interest rate return to public debt, right? So in case you have a higher growth rate than the interest rate, then you might be able to run, deficit without getting into default, which is something I'm not sure you will be able to look into it. Your institution story is quite interesting, but I'm not a political economics. Just want to comment on this. Having an index variable like a quantity of institution, I'm not sure it's valid in this kind of investigation. Sorry about too many questions.
Okay, if I may just respond to the first one. What I said was that if we have negative autocorrelation in surpluses, what exactly that means, by the way, is that if you have negative autocorrelation, then if I go up to this, if there's a negative autocorrelation structure of the surpluses, that means that the expected surplus, the present value of surpluses here, would go down. The right-hand side would go down because the people here do not expect, we don't expect that the fiscal authorities will have enough resources in the future to service accumulated liabilities. And if they do not expect that the authority will have enough resources to service accumulated liabilities, they will spend today. So aggregate demand increases, price increases. If price increases, omega here is total liabilities expressed as a ratio of nominal GDP. So if price increases, omega will have to go down. That's the logic that I found in the literature as to how that happens. So that negative correlation, that's how negative autocorrelation of surpluses is resulting in a negative response in liabilities, which is the same under Ricardian regime. And that's why it's very difficult to identify under those scenarios. I think the others were comments. I think I'll look into those, yeah.
Thank you. One last question, yeah?
I just want to understand. So you're saying these countries run budget surpluses and then they're going to repay their liabilities, right? But do they run first some positive? Because I'm thinking surpluses, it's going to be shocking for those countries to run budget surpluses. I would have loved to see how many episodes of surpluses they had to pay off liabilities, because I don't think Malawi have run budget surpluses for the last 10 years. I don't think so. Prof, I'm right? Yes, so I don't see how you can even posit that by running budget surpluses, they pay off liabilities. 1, 2, most of those liabilities come from also international donors. We have money from the World Bank. Okay, and sometimes those money you don't ask for them. And then remember as well, the debt relief can play a role. And to pay off liabilities, these countries also can print money, which usually happen. I can cite the case of the DRC. So I wanted to understand, do you really think that they can run surpluses to pay liabilities?
Okay, thank you.
So do donations are included in these surpluses? Essentially, this is one potential way to address the question.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. I do not say that these countries run surpluses. For the avoidance of doubt, if you look at this graph here, you'll notice that we have negative surpluses, which means we have deficits. All I'm saying is that, you see, it doesn't have to be running a surplus. It can also just be reducing the deficit. Okay, so I'm not saying that they run surpluses, but they could also reduce deficits, which is still a positive shock. Okay, I don't know if I have responded to that question, but yeah, when I say surpluses, I'm not trying to say that these countries are running surpluses. If anything, most countries, even advanced economies, run deficits. Yeah. In terms of what did you say?
The donations are included in the budget deficit, budget surpluses computation?
No, I did not consider that. Yeah, I did not consider that.
Usually it's included. Especially countries like colonized by France, a large portion, I'm not going to say a large portion, but some portion of their budget comes from France.
This will be looked at later.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It has been an interesting presentation. Thank you. Now we have the next presentations by Munekika Katayama, Demand for Fiscal Policy in an Aging Country.